Today we're joining Enrichmond's TreeLab manager, McFarland, for a walk through the woods at Great Shiplock Park and Chapel Island near downtown Richmond, Virginia. He identifies native trees and perennials, including local favorite, the pawpaw tree.
So here we have our native river birch, Betula nigra. This one's obviously in its native habitat here along the James River. See, they're tolerant of water, not super huge trees, usually in the probably 30 to 40 foot range. Generally you'll find them multi-stemmed or multi-trunked, a lot of branches, but beautiful trees. Easy way to tell them apart from others is they're really distinctive peeling bark, which you can see pretty well in the mature trunks, but further up the tree as it gets a little younger, it's kind of more white and orangey. So it has a lot of nice also winter interest once the leaves come off. So great tree, provides great habitat for native insects, places for birds to roost. Alright, so here we have a beautiful native grass, something called sea oats, Chasmanthium latifolium. Actually pretty easy to find at local garden centers. It's a great native grass, but kind of its showcase piece are the seeds, which look like oat seeds. They're very showy, beautiful throughout this time of year and then into the fall as well. So you can leave them up year round, which I would suggest doing. Maybe cut them down in the spring as soon as you see new growth beginning at the bottom. But wonderful plant, year-round interest, and you usually find it around riversides or pond sides. Maybe not standing wet water and soils, but in places where the soils might get saturated decently well between rain events. Here they grow usually this height, 3 to 4 foot. Great native grass. Here we have a large sycamore tree, native sycamore, Platanus occidentalis. And mostly what we're going to be looking at is the differences between very mature large trunk and the younger or smaller parts of the trunk further up the tree, which is the usual coloration that most people think of when they think of a sycamore, is that white and grays and maybe a bit of green, you could say, further up the tree that you can spot in the dead of winter, no problem. But on these trees, when they're large and mature, the base of the trunk looks rather nondescript and a lot like other trees in the forest. So, you know, one where here you can easily see up to the top, see the leaves, see that bark, but in some normal forest you might not be able to look up through the canopy and see it. But the bark can be pretty average on these, even in older age. Here we have Boxelder maple, Aster negundo. Don't want to talk bad on it, but it's usually kind of a scrappy tree, multi-stemmed. Seems to be bothered by a lot of things, insects, foliar diseases. But you find it a lot of times in habitats that are kind of this slightly disturbed riverside or kind of waterside habitats. They're generally scrubby on the edge of hedge lines and brush rows. Trunk and bark is really nondescript. I guess you'd say light gray. But a more defining feature of this tree is the leaves, which when you think of a maple tree, you might think of the Canadian flag and the maple leaf, which is that single kind of palm-like looking leaf. Well, Boxelder maple has different leaves that are pinnate, so they are basically broken apart, which is much different than the usual single looking leaf of red maples, silver maples, sugar maples. So that's one defining feature on these. They also get large clusters of seeds, which I don't see on this one, but if we find some more later, we'll definitely get some video of that as well. So Aster negundo, Boxelder maple. So here we can see the seeds of Aster negundo, the Boxelder maple. And you can see it's very distinct. They're in chains. Well, looks like, you know, chains of these seeds, and there's a lot of them, but they're pretty easy to spot. It's also an easy way to tell it's a Boxelder, again, besides the differences of the leaves compared to other maples. But just wanted to show what these clusters of seeds look like on Boxelder maples. All right, so here we have Goldenrod, and honestly I'm not even going to try to figure out exactly which species, but this is the genus of goldenrod is Solidago. This is just starting to bloom. It's about the second week of August, and so one of the earlier ones to bloom. They can be tall, they can be short, because goldenrods come in all different shapes and sizes, but beautiful yellow flowers, a great kind of late season pollinator plant. You'll see everything from parasitic wasps, predatory wasps, bees, flies, butterflies. Every insect you can imagine gets on these because it's one of the few flowers later in the season as fall comes on. So beautiful flowers, great to have at home, in your backyard, in a meadow garden, or just as a plant for late season pollinators. So here we have silver maple, another native maple, Aster saccharinum. Big specimen of this, usually a little more weak-wooded of the maples. They'll usually break a lot in windstorms. Some people call them a junky tree. I don't think any trees are junky, but this has, as compared to the trident maple we looked at earlier, this has leaves that are a little more like the maple leaf you think of, but they're a little more deeply cut. But you can see kind of the one single leaf together versus the pinnate leaves of the Aster negunda, the Boxelder. They get a decent yellow fall color, but they're a faster growing maple, one you might see around. They reseed pretty readily as well. There's a nice size one here at this park, so pretty trees, and oftentimes kind of a quote-unquote wives' tale I hear about them is that before it rains, their leaves apparently will turn upside down, and they're kind of silvery on the bottom a little bit, and so they apparently flip before rain, and it's supposed to be an omen of rain coming, so one thing to keep an eye on as well when you're around silver maples. So here we have a plant you'll probably see, or you're guaranteed to see somewhere in your garden or roadside, edge of fields, pokeberry or poke. This is a native, Phytolacca americana, and we're going to look at this one first. It still has some flowers happening, pretty little flowers. You can see they happen in clusters down the stem, and as these mature, they grow to these green berries, and later on they turn a deep purpley red. It's a wonderful food source for birds. Again, late season, late summer, early into fall. Pretty easy to spot. I honestly think they're actually kind of pretty. The kind of purpley red stems, they're tall. They can be 6 foot tall or even bigger sometimes. But now is an easy time of year to spot them with the flowers happening or the fruit starting to ripen, or some already have fruit that's ripened, but it's a great food source for our native bird species. And although they will spread them throughout your garden, if you can leave a spot, a couple of them up throughout the year, they're a great plant to leave in your yard to track wildlife. So here, we can look at basically the mature color of the berries on pokeweed. And this plant's a big plant. It's a little taller than me, so it's about 6 foot plus. But you can see the cluster of berries ripen, get that dark color. Really a pretty plant, especially to have around later in the season. Again, a lot of color and a great food source for our native wildlife. So here we have another great kind of late summer, early fall blooming native plant. Sometimes called mistflower, or some people will call it azuratum when it's not truly azuratum by genus. The genus is Conoclinium, species Coelestinum. But you can see it's got beautiful kind of pale purpley pink colored flowers. Not big, but again, another great late season source of food and nectar for pollinators. And right alongside this, figured to point it out right away, is a non-native, but still a pretty flower, this blue guy, Chinese dayflower. Called dayflower because it only lasts a day. They melt really quick in the heat. Non-native, so you don't want it, but it's beautiful in color, so figured we'd take a look at it. But here's another native plant. This is a more shade-tolerant plant. This is white wood aster, Eurybia divaricata. Again, late bloomer or mid to late bloomer, so another good source of nectar for your pollinators. But it prefers the understory, prefers shade. It's in competition here with some of the vining honeysuckle, but it's still pushing through. But nice dark stems. The white flowers are a good giveaway to spot this plant in the understory of a forest. So here we have a native passionflower, yellow passionflower, Passiflora lutea. You can see compared to the purpley one, Passiflora incarnata, I believe. These are much smaller flowers, but still very unique, very intricate. Really cool. They're kind of a bright green to almost yellow, barely yellow color. It's voracious in its growth. It's kind of overtaken this area of shrubs and brush and trees. But it is a native, meant to do this. Don't rip it out, but it's also just a little joy to see these really beautiful little flowers this time of year. All right, so here we have native fruit tree everybody loves. Fruits are not quite ripe yet, but this is Pawpaw, Asimina triloba. As you can see, this is a bigger tree. They look very tropical when you're under their canopy, which is kind of a neat feature of them. And you'll start to find now, which I did find, the fruit start to drop off the tree. They are funky looking. Large, green, don't even know how to describe the shape, I guess like a giant bean pod. But you'll want to eat them actually once they've fallen off the tree, number one. And number two, you actually want them to be kind of soft. Don't want to say the point of rotting, but you want them to be soft. And you just eat them right off the seed. There's some larger seeds on the inside, but again, very tropical looking. They actually taste somewhat tropical, kind of banana-y, but a great native plant. There are some cultivars of this as fruit trees, which will grow better in your yard than just the straight species. But here we have a nice specimen, and give you an idea what the fruit looks like this time of year. In a couple weeks, they should be ready to go. They'll fall off the tree by themselves when they're ready to eat. So here we have another non-native with, it's got to be one of my favorite common names of a plant, beefsteak plant. This, again, prefers shade. It will reseed readily. It's pretty easy to spot, kind of a glossy leaf, but an easy way to determine if it is beefsteak plant is the smell of the leaf, very fragrant. Sometimes if they have a little more sunlight, the leaves will kind of turn purpley red, but it's making its way into a lot of forested environments and obviously outcompeting natives. So keep an eye out for this guy as well, the beefsteak plant, and pull it out when you see it. The ACA family, I think it said, but it's minty. It smells minty. Not bad. So this plant is another native, quite common in this park. Yellow bear's foot is a common name for it. We've also hairy leaf cup is what I've seen. But you can see it's got really pretty yellow flowers. The plants can be quite large. Some here 6 foot, some here probably closer to 8 foot tall. Very unique leaf shape, as well as opposite leaves, so it looks very geometric in its form, opposite leaves being across the stem from each other. So opposite branched, opposite leaves, and these leaves you can see are quite large, coarse. They feel slightly hairy. The stems are also slightly hairy as well, a little bristly, but pretty little yellow flowers, and obviously grows well, spreads everywhere where it can, in light shade to seen it in full sun as well. So another great native plant that if given the space can fill up your garden or backyard easily and be a great pollinator plant as well.